In this deck tech, we're stacking all the buffs on top of each other. Welcome to Outmaneuver. I'm Faith, and today we're going to be looking at a deck tech for Captain Rex. Captain Rex is a command heroism leader which can deploy if you control 5 or more resources. When he deploys, he's a 2/6 Republic clone trooper. When we deploy Captain Rex, we're going to create a clone trooper token, which is a 2/2 Republic clone trooper unit. Each other friendly trooper unit gets +0/+1. This means that when Captain Rex deploys, we're getting 4/9 worth of stats for his deploy at 5 resources. The downside, however, is that is across 2 different units. So that means that we're not going to be able to use all of that attack right away because the clone trooper token is going to enter exhausted. And because their powers are divided, it means that it's going to take us more actions to use all of them. On the plus side, however, it does mean that if they remove one of those 2 units, that they're not totally removing all of our leader ability in one action. Rex's passive ability to give each other friendly trooper unit you control +0/+1 is also going to benefit the other cards in our deck. Because of this ability, it's going to be important for us to build a deck around the trooper trait. Now, I will say there's different ways to build a Captain Rex deck. This deck is not going to be a deck around putting a bunch of clone trooper tokens on the board, and it's not necessarily an aggro deck. I would definitely build this deck as a more mid-range deck, which is going to try to play effective value units, while also trying to create some of those clone trooper tokens, and then it's going to be using other units in the deck to buff up all of our units. Captain Rex also has an ability while he's not deployed. As an action, you can exhaust Captain Rex and pay 2 resources. When you do this, if a friendly unit attacked this phase, create a clone trooper token. So this has a couple different aspects in it. One, we're most likely not going to be able to do this ability on turn 1. Some people may try to use this ability as much as possible in the early game to get all those tokens out in order so that when Captain Rex deploys, he's going to have a bunch of troopers hopefully on the board to buff up. However, I don't think this is the best way to use Captain Rex's ability here. In the early game, we're going to want to play, in my opinion, our other units in order to build a board with more power. And then we're going to be wanting to use this effect actually a little bit later in the game. Usually, I like to use it either right before Rex deploys on that same turn or after Rex has been defeated and returned back to our leader zone. We've paired Captain Rex with the base Tarkentown. Tarkentown is an aggression base with 25 HP that has an epic action to deal 3 damage to a damaged non-leader unit. What I really like about Tarkentown is the ability to remove a unit that we weren't able to totally finish off. I think this is a very effective thing to do and something that I always want to be on the lookout to think, okay, even if I just deal some damage to this, but it's still alive, how am I going to finish it off? Tarkentown allows you to do that. I also find that Tarkentown is a great counter to an ECL. So let's look now at some of these ways that we're going to buff our units. And I'm going to want to include in this deck all of our ways that we can. Red 3 is a ship, which is going to give each of our other friendly heroism units raid 1. On the other side, we have Admiral Yularen, who also a 3-cost unit. He's going to be a little bit stronger health-wise as a 2/5, and he's going to have Restore 1 himself, also going to give you a little bit of life back. He's going to give each other friendly heroism unit +0/+1. This is going to, again, buff not only our clone troopers, but like Red 3 is also going to buff most of the other units in our deck. Where Red 3 is going to give us that attack power when we attack, Admiral Yularen is going to give our units an extra health. One of the few units that Admiral Yularen and Red 3 are not going to buff is our next card, Clone Commander Cody. Clone Commander Cody is a 5-cost just command unit who is notably a trooper. He's a 4/4 with Overwhelm. He has an ability with Coordinate, which means that if you have 3 or more units, then the Coordinate activates. It's going to give each other friendly unit +1/+1 and Overwhelm. So with our deck, as we're going to be trying to buff our other units, keep our units alive, make them stronger, we're going to want to keep them on the board to have Coordinate, and then Clone Commander Cody is going to make them stronger. One thing, as opposed to Admiral Yularen or Red 3, is Commander Cody is going to give each of our units +1/+1, so he's going to help them in both power and defense. And giving them Overwhelm as well mean that our bigger units are going to be able to actually not have to choose between attacking their units or attacking their base. Most of the time, as a mid-range deck, it's going to be effective for us to take out the unit and then also still deal damage to their base. The one downside of Clone Commander Cody is that it does require Coordinate in order to buff up our other units. So he is going to be a little bit vulnerable to our opponent getting to choose to take out one of our weaker units. However, as long as we have Coordinate triggered when we play him, he's going to make that a little more difficult. Him costing 5 resources as well, though, is going to be beneficial with Captain Rex, as we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Next up, we have Shakti, who is a 4-cost command heroism unit, who is going to give each friendly token unit +1/+0. So first off, those clone trooper tokens that we're going to create are going to get stronger just by playing Shakti. She does also have an ability, though, that when she attacks, she's going to create another clone trooper token. So this is going to be a way that we can increase our army. Her stat line as a 4-cost 3/4 is going to be a little troublesome. However, her ability to make our unit stronger, and we get to control when we play her, so we have enough tokens to make it worth it. And the fact that she on her own can create some, meaning that if our opponent is going very space heavy, we can play this and it will kind of force them to respond before our board gets out of hand, make her a worthwhile inclusion. The last card that we're going to include in our deck that's going to affect all of our units is going to be our leader, Captain Rex. As we talked about, he's going to give each other friendly trooper unit +0/+1. So units like Clone Commander Cody are going to be buffed up by Captain Rex. But he's also going to buff our other units as well. However, where Captain Rex and Clone Commander Cody go really well together is the fact that when we deploy Captain Rex, as we talked about, we're going to create that clone trooper token. This means that if, as one action, we deploy Captain Rex, in our next action, we play Clone Commander Cody, or even the other way around, we're then able to have enough units to trigger Coordinate, even if beforehand we started with no units on the board. This is going to allow us to have more power and going to really make our opponent have to immediately get rid of Clone Commander Cody, or risk having us keep Coordinate by the fact that we keep playing units in further turns if they're just going to trade off 1 for 1. Now that we've looked at all the units in our deck that are going to make our other units stronger, let's look at our turn 1 plays. First, let's look at Battlefield Marine, which is a 2-cost command heroism 3/3 and is a trooper. This is just a really generically good stat line and also going to be a trooper, meaning that he can benefit from 4 out of our 5 buffing units. Up next, we have Echo, who is also a 2-cost command heroism unit, which is also a trooper. However, he's a 2/2. He does have a coordinate ability, which is going to give him +2/+2. It's interesting to compare Battlefield Marine and Echo. One, we always have a 3/3 stat line, and the other one, we have a 2/2 stat line that can become a 4/4 stat line. Typically, I'm going to want to prefer the Battlefield Marine myself, because I just like the consistency of having that 3/3. However, Echo is able to be a 4/4, which can be strong, but he does require us to play in a specific way. If our opponent plays a Battlefield Marine on their turn, and we play an Echo as we're going second as our first turn, then that Battlefield Marine is going to take out our Echo, and it's going to feel pretty bad. So generally, if we have multiple units to play on turn 1, I will not want to play Echo first. I'll want to wait till a little bit later to play Echo. Actually, a decent turn to play Echo is on the 5 resource turn after we deploy Rex, because then we're going to have 2 other units in play, meaning that by simply playing Rex, we're going to have Coordinate triggered. So he does require a little bit of setup, but that setup can be worth it with a very effective 4/4 for 2 unit as its upside. Up next, we're going to look at our 2 turn 1 space units. Like Echo and Battlefield Marine, Anakin's Interceptor and Green Squadron A-Wing are both very similar, both costing 2, both being aggression and heroism, and both having 3 health, where Green Squadron A-Wing has initially 1 power and has Raid 2, meaning that it can attack for a 3/3 on its own. Anakin's Interceptor is a 2/3 and also can gain a buff, but it gets its buff if our health has 15 or more damage on it. So this means that when we're attacking with these units, Green Squadron A-Wing is at the beginning of the game going to hit harder, and therefore, in my opinion, it is going to be the better play most of the time. There is a potential card interaction which you should be aware of here, however. Because Green Squadron A-Wing has only 1 power, compared to Anakin's Interceptor's 2 power, cards like Kylo's TIE Silencer, which is a 3/2, if they're going first, can attack and take out our Green Squadron A-Wing while staying alive, where a Kylo's TIE Silencer cannot take out an Anakin's Interceptor and stay alive on its own. Our final note on these turn 1 units is that these are all units that are going to be able to be buffed up by most of our other units, particularly our turn 2 upgrade units, which we see as Red 3 and Admiral Yularen. Our other turn 2 units we want to talk about, first up, is Echo-Based Defender, which is a 3-cost command heroism unit, which is a 4/3 trooper with Sentinel. So this is also going to be a card that can be buffed up by 4 of our 5 buffing units, as it's a trooper. Its status as a Sentinel is going to allow us to keep some of our other units alive. So something like an Echo turn 1, if we are on the play, can be protected by an Echo-Based Defender, meaning that it won't be as vulnerable. Its 4/3 stat line is going to allow it to effectively trade up with some 4-cost units, particularly like K2SO. If our opponent plays that, its 4 power can deal with it. Its 3 health is a tad concerning because something like a Battlefield Marine on turn 1 can take it out. And so we are going to have to be a little bit thoughtful on how we use Echo-Based Defender, which has fallen out of favor a little bit. However, that trooper trait can be beneficial for when we deploy our leader, meaning that our Echo-Based Defender would be at minimum of 4/4. Up next, we have Cassian Andor. This 3-cost heroism 3/5 unit is really played for its smuggle effect. I'm not normally going to play this on turn 2 unless I absolutely have to. Where its real benefit comes is from paying 5 as a smuggle cost, because when you do, it enters play ready. And so that's going to be something that can be an effective way to end a game. Looking up next, we have Batch Brothers. Batch Brothers are 3-cost aggression heroism trooper 2/1, so its stat line itself is fairly weak. However, when played, you create a clone trooper token. So this is going to be beneficial because it's going to allow us to gain 2 units on the board, helpful for coordinate. It also can benefit from all 5 of the units we talked about that can buff our units, because the clone trooper token it creates can benefit Shock T. Being a 3-cost unit means we can theoretically have Echo turn 1, Batch Brothers turn 2, buffing up our Echo to a 4/4, and then maybe playing something like a Shock T turn 3, making that clone trooper token now a 3/2 as well. Our final turn 2 play is a card we're probably not going to play on turn 2 itself. Usually we're going to play it a little bit later in the game, and that's Admiral Akbar. Admiral Akbar, 3-cost command heroism 1/4 unit with restore 1. However, the main thing about this card is going to be it's when played, dealing damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. This is going to be beneficial because we're going to be trying to play these units, which are going to buff up our other units. We're going to naturally want multiple units on the board. So Admiral Yularen is going to be our way of using the fact we have a lot of units on the board positively to deal some damage. This can also be a way to put a small amount of damage onto a unit in order to use Tarkin Town to defeat that unit. Also can be a way to get rid of Sentinels, which is going to be an annoying thing for our deck, is trying to get through a bunch of waves of Sentinels. Let's now jump from our turn 2 plays to cards that cost 5. So it's a little bit of a jump. Normally turn 3 would happen next. There are currently 3 5-cost cards within the Heroism Aggression Command colors, which are quite good. First, we're going to look at Anakin Skywalker, which is a 6/6 unit with a coordinate effect that when it attacks, we draw a card. The next one is Aayla Secura, which is a 5-cost command heroism unit, which is a 6/5 with the coordinate on attack, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to this unit. And finally, we have the All-Star, which is our 5-cost aggression heroism 6/6 resistance Poe Dameron, who has an on-attack effect, which we can discard cards to either deal damage, remove upgrades, or make someone discard a card. The problem with 5-cost units is that this is definitely the middle part of the game. Maybe against an aggro deck, this is closer to the later part of the game. And so we're really going to be looking for units which are going to be very high impact. All 3 of these cards are going to really be best when they're attacking. Their stat lines are all good. I mean, 6/6/6/5 for 5 is fine, but they are going to all require you to attack. We do not have Energy Conversion Lab because Rex is green and we couldn't play red if we were playing Rex. And so we're not going to really get the benefit of a bunch of these cards. And so you're really going to want to choose at maximum one of these cards. Some people might choose to include 0 of these cards. However, I think these are all really strong. And so it's all going to depend on how you're kind of building your deck. For me, I just don't like the potential that we're not always going to have coordinate right away when these units are attacking. And so for that reason, I like the fact I like Poe the most because Poe is able to generate a lot of value on his own. And he also has a way to end a game with the ability to deal 2 damage to a base as his on-attack effect. And so for that reason, I'm going to include Poe in my deck and not include these other 2, as they don't really have any of my other supporters that I'm looking at. However, if you choose to run either Anakin or Ayla otherwise, I can understand why. Finally, let's look at the other cards that are in the deck. First up here, we have Daring Raid. Daring Raid is a 1-cost event which can deal 2 damage to a unit or base. This is going to be a card which, A, because if it hit a base, can end a game. 2, can deal damage to defeat a unit, as obviously what you would run a card like this for. Or 3, it can also be used to, again, ping a unit and then using Tarkin Town to finish that unit off. It allows a lot of flexibility, and for 1 cost, it's the most effective burn spell that we have. Next up, we have K2SO. This is a 4-cost heroism 4/4 with Overwhelm. It also has an effect when defeated. You can deal 3 damage to opponent's base, or you can make them discard a card. Typically, in the early game, I'll tend to choose to make my opponent discard a card. However, if my opponent only has 3 or less life, dealing that 3 damage can be a very effective way of ending the game, almost putting your opponent into checkmate. Its 4/4 stat line with Overwhelm is fairly effective and can also get buffs from things like Admiral Yularen, Red 3, or Clone Commander Cody. Up next, we've got the 6-cost heroism 7/6 Wrecker. Wrecker also has Overwhelm, so making it a very strong unit, but it also has a when played effect. You may defeat a friendly resource. If you do, deal 5 damage to a ground unit. A couple unfortunate things is the fact it only can hit a ground unit is a little bit limiting, and the fact that we don't have Energy Conversion Lab means that we will not be able to use his high stats right away instantly. However, he is still a threat that we can play on the board, and his ability, the fact that he has a when played effect that can impact our opponent's board, also warrants his inclusion. After that, we've got our Command Heroism Trooper for 6, 4/4 Captain Rex. Captain Rex has an ability that when played, he can create 2 Clone Trooper tokens. This means that when we play this 6-cost unit, we're getting effectively 8/8 worth of stats. However, the benefit/downside is that that's across 3 different units. With Captain Rex in particular, though, being across 3 units is generally a pretty good thing, because that means it's going to be very hard for our opponent to take out them in one action, especially with something like Coordinate, which asks us to have 3 units. The fact that Captain Rex himself brings 3 units, and we need another unit that has the Coordinate, it's going to be very difficult for our opponent to effectively shut off our Coordinate within 1 action. A final benefit is that with Captain Rex is that all of his things that he's creating are going to be very beneficial to the buffs that we're providing from our earlier units we mentioned. The Clone Trooper tokens themselves can get benefits from all 5 of the units, the buffer units, and Captain Rex, being a trooper, can get benefits from 4 of them. So he's going to definitely take advantage of those buffs. Finally, we have the 7-cost U-Wing Reinforcement. This is our second event in the deck, which is a Command Heroism one. And we can search the top 10 cards of our deck for up to 3 units with a combined cost of 7 or less, and play each of them for free. One thing to note is we don't have any 1-cost units, and so if we grab Wrecker or Captain Rex for their when played effects, they're going to be the only unit we play. However, otherwise, you can mix and match. You may choose to put in 1 big unit, or you could choose to put in multiple smaller units. With U-Wing Reinforcements, the 10 cards you're drawing are going to be quite a lot, and so you should have a lot of choices to choose from on what's going to fit you in that certain situation. One of my favorite plays is to take Echo-based Defender and one of our sideboard cards, Bright Hope, and with this 1 action UN Reinforcement, we're able to provide Sentinels in both the space and the ground arena, which can sometimes be just enough to keep you alive in a desperate situation. Now we're going to look at the deck itself. So this is my deck, Friendship.deck. Friendship because we're going to be providing all these buffs to our other units. So we're going to want to try to make that our game plan to keep those units alive, have units that are going to make those other units stronger. We're going to have a lot of 3 costs. You're always going to want to try to play the maximum number of copies of a card you can play. with a few 2 costs scattered throughout. Starting off, we have Cassian Andor's 2 copies of. One of the reasons for that is the fact that he doesn't get as many buffs as our other units, as he's not a trooper, and he's not a token, obviously. However, again, that ability to smuggle him out is going to be very effective. But again, he's not the most best unit to play on turn 2 himself. And so for that reason, we're going to keep him at 2 copies. The other one we're going to have at 2 copies is going to be Shock T. Its stat line is just a little bit too weak for us to have the full 3 copies. It's going to be a good anthem to play to make our clone troopers a little bit stronger. However, as we can see in this deck, we're not producing a ton of cards which are going to create those tokens. However, they are still going to be an important part of our game plan. We have Wrecker at 2 copies. We mentioned before, without ECL, his big stat line may not be as effective as in some other decks, but that when played effect does make up for it, and his body is important enough that our opponent is going to have to deal with. And 2 U-Wing reinforcements. That being at 7 resources to play it is a little bit later in the game, so we're going to want to try to finish the game on that turn or the turn after, or else we probably have lost the game. And so it's kind of a last hurrah card, and for that reason, we're only including 2 of it in the deck. All our other Anthem units, that are going to make our unit stronger, we're going to keep at 3, and we want to make sure that we have 12 turn 1 plays, which means that with a mulligan, we have, I think it's about a 96-97% chance of having a turn 1 play. We're going to want to make sure we're playing units every turn. Again, making sure you curve out on your turns is going to be important. And we do have Rex that can fill in if we're on 5 resources and we only have a 3-cost unit, or we don't really have a good enough second play. We could use Captain Rex ability if we attacked with something, play our 3-cost unit to effectively curve out, making sure we're taking advantage of all the resources we have. Finally, I want to look at our sideboard for the deck. The first card I want to talk about in the sideboard is Bright Hope. Bright Hope is a 4-cost command heroism, 2/6 vehicle with Sentinel. It also has a when played effect. You can return a friendly non-leader ground unit and to your owner's hand. If you do, draw a card. This in this deck isn't going to be massively effective. Returning a card to our hand does give it a pseudo heal. It also, with something like Batch Brothers, can return it to our hand to play again to create another clone trooper token. However, its main inclusion is going to be as a Sentinel in space. I think in Twilight of the Republic, we now have enough space units where we may see very focused space aggro decks. And so having an answer to those is going to be very important. And Bright Hope provides that. As mentioned with U-Wing reinforcement, being able to get a Bright Wing and an Echo-based defender can be very important. I think as well with set 4, which is very much hinted at a space-focused theme, we're going to see more space decks in the future, and so having enough space protection is going to be important. Up next, we have Heroic Resolve, which is be our only upgrade in the deck. There is some people that would prefer Heroic Sacrifice over this, which is kind of similar as a kind of way to end a game. I like Heroic Resolve. It has a little bit more ways to be responded to, but it does give you some more effective upgrade for a longer time period, and also has the ability to pay 2 resources and defeat the upgrade Heroic Resolve, to give that unit, to attack with the unit and give it +4/+0 and overwhelm, which can be an effective way to end a game. That is at 2 copies as well. Next up, we've got Mace Windu, which is a 7-cost heroism 5/7 unit with ambush, and when this unit attacks and defeats a unit, ready him. This is a way that we can use as kind of a pseudo board wipe, especially with a deck that goes very wide. If we're going to have a lot of decks that can create a bunch of clone trooper tokens, it's going to be an effective way to remove a lot of those units, and can also, when it does defeat a unit, it comes back readied and can attack their base. This is a more mid-range solution. So if you're going to build your Captain Rex deck in a more aggro-focused or more clone trooper token theme, you're maybe going to build your deck a little bit different. However, the way I chose to build my deck, I think Mace Windu is a very effective way to be a board clear and potentially a game ender as well, because it can enter ready if you defeat a unit. And finally, we're going to have 2 copies of Home 1. Again, more of a little bit later game of a solution. The fact that he gives all of your other units Restored 1 and has Restored 2 himself means that you're going to be able to heal up over time And he also has an ability that when you play him, you can play a heroism unit from your discard pile. It's going to cost 3 less. So going to allow us to bring another unit back into play. Sometimes something like an Echo-based Defender can be used to play to create another Sentinel to hopefully keep us around a little longer. And if we have some units on the board, they will get Restore as well. This is my deck tech for this Captain Rex build. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope we see you guys next time on Outmaneuver.